Hello. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of JB Nagar CP Study Circle, I welcome you all for the today's webinar. Today we have with us CA Jatin Kanbar and CA Manish Shah, and the topic for the today's webinar is Concept of Equalization Levy under Income Tax Act 1961. I welcome both the speaker on the JB Nagar Study Circle platform. I request CA Naresh Khetanji to introduce both the speaker.
Good morning, everybody. It's my privilege to introduce two speakers for the day, and both the speakers are from Deloitte Global Business. Mr. Jatin is a partner, a chartered accountant in Deloitte Global Business, a chartered accountant and Bachelor of Commerce, and has experience over 19 years in the field of taxation, both domestic and international. Jatin has a wide range of experience in advising MNC clients in corporate tax advisory, structuring of investment in and outside India, cross-border tax advisory, tax management and compliances, litigation support and restructuring and reorganization of the business. The second speaker for the day is Manish Shah. Manish Shah is also a senior manager in Deloitte Global Business. Manish is a chartered accountant and Bachelor of Commerce and have over 8 years of experience in the field of corporate taxation. Manish Shah is also part of the corporate tax team advising MNC clients mainly in TMT sectors. Both the speakers will carry us today through by giving on the equalization levy, which is they normally call it EL, the background, scope and ambit of expanded scope of EL as introduced by the Finance Act 20, whether any foreign tax credit is available under DTAA, constitutional validity, and its overlap with the provision of the Income Tax Act. Welcome, and now I open the floor for Mr. Jatin and Manish Shah.
Thank you, Mr. Khetan, and good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome for this session on equalization levy. As Mr. Khetan mentioned, I, along with my colleague Manish Shah, will take all the participants through the law of equalization levy and some of the practical aspects which are arising out of this expanded levy, which is applicable from this current financial year. So with this, let me just straight away get into the background of equalization levy. This is the agenda for the day. We will, as I mentioned, we will touch upon the background, why the levy has been introduced, what has led to the levy of equalization levy in India, where are the other countries, in terms of taxation of digital transactions. We will touch upon the overview of that as well. And since 2016, what has happened on equalization levy in India. And with this current the current amendment to the Finance Act in terms of expansion of the scope of equalization levy, how does this levy apply to the expanded definition? What are the practical issues? And we'll also talk about the procedural aspects of the levy. So as we are aware, we are in the age where there is a lot happening in terms of the information and communications technology. The business models are undergoing change. There is a lot of penetration of internet across the world. And with this changing business models, the supply and procurement of goods and services, obviously the way it was happening in the past, has substantially undergone change. With these new business models, obviously the tax laws also need to keep pace with whatever is happening, in terms of how the business models are changing. This coupled with the BEPS action plans, again, as many of us would be aware, on several action points, including on the digital economy taxation, has sort of led to the laws that
ಅದಕ್ಕೆ
are
ಸಂಗ್ಲ ಮೆಜಲ್ ನಂಬರ್
evolving
ಕಾರ್ಡ್ ತುಗಲ್ ಕಾಲಮನು
across countries.
ಮಾರಿಗೆ ತಕೊಂಡು ರಂಡೆ ಬುತ್ ಮಾರ್ಕ್ಸ್ ಅಂತಲ್ಲ ನೇನು
May I request the participants to please be on mute? Thank you. Yeah. So this is largely the background, in terms of the taxation of digital economy. If you can move on to the next slide, you can elaborate on that. So in particular, as regards taxation of digital economy, as I mentioned that, there is emergence of new business models. Obviously, e-commerce, supply, e-commerce procurement, social media, digital wallets, everything is now a part of our normal lives. We have the age of iClouds, websites, remote access, and if I may say so, the current situation since last 3-4 months has sort of highlighted how life can still move on with everybody still being at home or primarily being at home. So this is sort of emphasizing how the world is undergoing a change. When we talk about taxation of digital economy, the key issues in terms of taxation of digital economy, which have been sort of highlighted and where consensus is sought to be achieved is, when we talk about taxation of digital economy, especially in the era of e-commerce taxation, how do you bring out the nexus for the purpose of taxation? So basically, the need for bringing in such laws like equalization levy is primarily because there is no physical nexus like we understand in a historical sense. We have been used to taxation of cross-border transactions either under the source rule, which is very much prevalent in India, or under a nexus rule where you would try and draw up a nexus to say that there is a business connection or there is a permanent establishment which you would want to tax. But if there is neither a source nor there is a physical nexus, then how do you tax such transactions? So that is one. Secondly, there is more and more realization that in this age, data or the sophistication in which the data is used, collected, analyzed, applied, needs to sort of given weightage in terms of how you should be taxing the digital transactions. Thirdly, rather, once you sort of decide to tax digital transaction, the question obviously arises as to what should be the attribution of the profits to this kind of transactions. Again, as we are aware, when we talk about cross-border transactions and where a non-resident or a foreign entity is providing services or selling goods in another country, and if there is a physical presence or a permanent establishment, there is always a concept of what is the right profit which should be attributed to the permanent establishment. Again, historically, the profits which you would attribute to the permanent establishment would be dependent on the functions performed by the permanent establishment, or the assets owned by the PE, or the risks taken by the PE. So you actually sort of do an evaluation as to what is the role of the permanent establishment when it comes to attribution of profits to that PE. And when we talk about digital presence, as many of us would realize that the attribution of the profits to the PE is not going to be that simple. And last but not the least, there is always a issue about characterization. In a digital business model, what is being paid, what is the characterization of that, whether it is, for the sale, purchase of products, services, royalties, FTS. So all these are issues on which the OECD, is trying to bring about a consensus on, how the digital taxation should happen. Having said that, in the interim, there are several measures which countries have taken. So if you can move on to the next slide. Yeah. So as I mentioned, given that, this is such a complex area, there is going to be, no single answer which, all countries would accept. There is obviously, if I may say, a divide between a group of countries, where, most of these companies which actually earn these digital revenues are based, for example, the US, and the countries where, largely the consumers are, for example, India. And the objectives of these countries would obviously be to protect its own tax base, and they will look at things differently. And therefore, it is not going to be easy to have a consensus, where all countries sort of agree to the manner of taxation. Having said that, a lot of work has been done since the last 3 or 4 years on this, and we are still, as we speak, there are, OECD is working on this. But having said that, in the interim, there were suggestions that, in the interim, whether countries can have certain unilateral measures to sort of tax the digital transactions. And these unilateral measures, obviously, by its very nature, may lead to a situation of double taxation, because the manner in which each country will implement will be different, and which we will see in a snapshot of how different countries are looking to implement this. So the equalization levy in India, which came in for the first time since 2016 under Chapter 7 of the Finance Act 2016, is one such unilateral measure by India. And hopefully, once there is a consensus, this will be relooked. So if I look at the global trends, we have sort of listed out countries, the countries or the areas in green are countries where some or the other law is already in place now to tax digital transactions. As I mentioned, India is one of the countries which sort of took the lead in bringing about a digital taxation in the form of equalization levy. Then there are countries which are still in the process of sort of implementing such a law. And then there are a host of countries which are sort of doing a wait and watch game in terms of what should be done once there is something concrete coming from OECD. So if I have to sort of give a snapshot of how different countries are looking at it, for example, in Italy, they have introduced a web tax. There is a 3% tax on digital transactions. My understanding is this is largely on B2B transactions, which is, and they have also sort of brought in the definition of significant economic presence, which again, many of you would be aware. India has also sort of expanded the definition of business connection to bring in significant economic presence. Israel has, expanded the definition of PE to bring in, the concept of significant digital presence similar to significant economic presence like in India. Understand that even in Argentina, there is a turnover tax for revenues derived by non-residents from rendition of online services. Again, this is currently pegged at 3% of the net price. France has introduced a GAFA tax on large internet and technology companies. Again, they have sort of deferred this implementation, but we'll have to see how it goes about. Singapore has, taken the route of GST, and I would say that, and we'll touch upon that. But to my mind, applicability of indirect tax could be quite parallel and exclusive of, how, this levy is taxed or this levy is brought about. There is a national digital tax on online advertising in Austria, again something which India brought in 2016. Russia has again weaved it into its VAT law to bring in digital transactions to tax. Saudi Arabia, like Israel and Italy, has sort of introduced the concept of a virtual services fee, which is deemed to exist when a non-resident provides services to a person in Saudi Arabia or Kuwait over a period of time exceeding a particular threshold under the treaty. So every country, and there are a few more in the next slide, if I may just go through that. Country like United Kingdom in the EU, they were the first ones to sort of bring in the diverted profit tax. And there is also a digital business tax, which is at the rate of 2% on, social networks, search engines, online marketplaces, with a global revenue of over 500 million pounds. So large, online platforms are already, taxed in countries like UK. Japan has, again, something which called consumption tax at the rate of 8% on digital services. European Union has given a guidance, to bring in some sort of a tax to consider, short-term measures. As I say that, many countries are looking at it as short-term or interim measures. Because there is an expectation that, once there is something concrete which is agreed on the BEPS Section 1, countries will take a look at it again. But in the interim, they don't want to sort of miss out on, what they believe is the correct tax which is payable by the non-resident entities selling goods in their countries. Australia has taken the route of, GST on digital transactions, and they have also introduced a few years back what is known as, a MAL or anti-avoidance law, in line with the UK's digital profit tax, to tax transactions that make sales in India, or companies that make sales in India but book that revenue offshore. So different countries dealing with it differently, but to my mind, the underlying objective and the concept remains the same, which being that, with the changing business models, you need to sort of evolve your tax laws such that, companies which do not have any physical presence in your country, but which has a large consumer base, which are selling goods online or providing services online, should pay some fair bit of tax in the country where the consumers are based or from where they are collecting the data. So now let us, with that sort of a backdrop, let us move to, specifically to India. Obviously, before the equalization levy was brought in, India did set up a committee, to look at the taxation of e-commerce. And the committee did examine several issues on how these new business models should be taxed. As I mentioned, the nexus rules are very important as to how do you try and bring a digital nexus, and, significant economic presence under Section 9 is an example of, how to draw a nexus of these digital transactions to India. Characterization of payment, as I said, again is something which is being debated as to how do you characterize. And, when we delve into this expanded scope of equalization levy, we will see that how there is an overlap of equalization levy and the source rule of taxation in India. And obviously issues relating to what weightages should be given, how the data should be valued, because data is the new oil, as they say, and a lot of weightage will be put on how the data is collected and mined, when it comes to profit attribution. So the committee took cognizance of obviously what the developments happening under Action Plan 1 under the BEPS project, and there were sort of three options which were highlighted. Option 1 being a new nexus-based significant economic presence. Option 2 is to say that you do a withholding tax, which is like the source-based rules which are there for FTS royalty, for example, in India. And the third option was the equalization levy. So these were the three options which were sort of there in the initial draft. And after examining these three options, the committee found that the first two options would require changes in a number of tax treaties. And again, as we are aware, there is a lot happening when we talk about amending multilateral treaties, or treaties amendment through multilateral instruments, and it is a long drawn process. However, the third option, which is levy of equalization, or rather charging equalization levy on such transactions, is a simpler option to implement in the interim. And it is more, as I was mentioning, a unilateral sort of option where India can sort of implement it without getting into too much bilateral negotiations or discussions. And therefore, this was the recommendation to bring out equalization levy in India. So the equalization levy, as I mentioned, first introduced in 2016 with effect from June 1, 2016. And again, initially for the first 3 or 4 years, the scope of equalization levy has been pretty narrow to my mind, because if you look at the committee's report, there were a host of services which which they thought you could levy equalization levy on, or which could be taxed, which are hitherto not taxed. But to begin with, it was decided that the equalization levy would apply initially on online advertisement or provision of online space and other related services. So as we call digital advertising. So the equalization levy on digital advertising has been applicable, or the tax rate which is specified is 6% of gross consideration. And this is payable by, specified for any consideration which is payable to a specified service provider being a non-resident, and the payer being a resident in India or a permanent establishment of a non-resident entity. If I may maybe jump the gun and just talk about what happens in terms of the foreign tax credit, because and we will see one big distinction, because the equalization levy, which is on online or digital advertisement, is a liability of the resident payer. So the resident payer is required to make the payment of this equalization levy. And the question, obviously when this law came in, the question was that, whether this is something for which the foreign service provider can claim a credit in its home country. So first of all, we need to recognize that the equalization levy is not an income tax. While it was introduced, in the Finance Act 2016, it is not part of the income tax levy. And when we talk about claiming foreign tax credit, the question of foreign tax credit arises when the charge or the levy is an income tax, and it is governed by the double tax avoidance agreement. So certainly this levy is not income tax, and it is not going to be creditable. And we will see both the scenarios where on advertisement, as I said, in any case, the liability to pay is on the resident payer, and therefore in any case it would not have been creditable for the non-resident. But even under the expanded scope for e-commerce supply or services, which has been introduced from the current year, there is to my mind there is no availability of foreign tax credit to the non-resident recipient of the income. Again, in terms of the advertisement or the equalization levy on advertisement, there was a minimum threshold of 1 lakh, which is to my mind very low. And equalization levy obviously is not applicable on service providers where the services are effectively connected to their permanent establishment in India. And again, this is quite logical because, what is the intention of bringing an equalization levy? The intention is to tax the transactions which are hitherto not taxable. So if a non-resident has got a permanent establishment in India, and if the services are connected or effectively connected with the permanent establishment, in any case would be taxable in India. So there is no point in sort of bringing equalization levy to such transactions. So this is essentially the framework of equalization levy on online advertisement. Obviously, there is a lot of debate whether 6% on gross, is it unreasonably too high? But this is what it is, and I understand that in the last 3 or 4 years, the industry have sort of built this. And taken it as a part of the cost of doing business in India. So this is the expanded scope of equalization levy, which has come in with effect from 1st April 2020, which is a topic of discussion for today, where we will discuss in detail how this levy works. This is essentially applicable at 2% on e-commerce transactions. Yeah. Okay, so there have been quite a few issues which were raised even on the taxation of online advertisement. To my mind, as I mentioned, that over the last 3 to 4 years, the industry has sort of built this cost into their contracts and moved around with it. Many of the non-resident service providers, the way I understand, are sort of contracting through their Indian arms, on this. And given that the Indian entities would already be taxed in India, this cost directly or indirectly is sort of built into the system. So this slide essentially sort of elaborates on the several aspects of taxation of online advertisement, which I already talked about. So I will sort of not repeat it. We can move on. Yeah. So in terms of the construct of equalization levy, it is neither a direct tax, or an indirect tax. It is a specific levy under the Finance Act, and that is the way it is. I think this debate about whether it is a direct tax or an indirect tax, it is definitely not an income tax. It is definitely not part of the GST. It is a specific levy, and that is the way it should be looked at. And to my mind, the legislature or the parliament has all the powers to sort of, levy any tax, within its jurisdiction. We talked about the foreign tax credit. Conceptually, it may appear that it is a double taxation because India is levying a tax for which the non-resident provider essentially does not get any credit in his home country. But the point is, as I mentioned, that this is supposed to be an interim measure, and once there is a consensus on how digital transactions will be taxed, how once countries agree, hopefully, to an extent, the double taxation will be or should be eliminated. But till that time, certainly there is an element of double taxation or economic double taxation, on these cross-border taxation transactions. So we will jump into now, the taxation of e-commerce supply of services, which is essentially, the new law which is coming from 1st April 2020. So if we actually look at the construct of this levy, before I get into the technical aspects of, what kind of transactions are brought within the tax ambit, or, which are the issues relating to taxation. One fundamental difference, which I think one needs to note, is that, and in contrast to taxation of online advertisement, is that when we look at the equalization levy on online or digital advertisement, the liability to pay, or the primary liability to pay, is on the resident payer in India who avails this service. However, the e-commerce supply of services, or the equalization levy on e-commerce supply and services, the liability to pay is on the non-resident e-commerce operator. So that is one fundamental difference between the two. So it is actually a tax which is to be directly paid and collected by the non-resident e-commerce operator. Second big difference is that advertisement equalization levy on digital advertisement was at 6% of the gross consideration. The equalization levy on e-commerce supply and services is at 2%. Now, what is the construct of this levy? So if you look at the construct of this levy, it talks about 2% on consideration which is received by the e-commerce operator above a minimum threshold of INR 2 crores from e-commerce supply or services of goods. So an e-commerce operator who supplies goods or services, or who conducts e-commerce supply of goods or services, is liable to pay equalization levy at the rate of 2% on the consideration which is received or receivable. And this levy is applicable from 1st April 2020. Now, there are, as I mentioned, there is a de minimis threshold of 2 crores. But, when we talk about these large e-commerce operators, again, the de minimis threshold is not very significant, but, it obviously takes care of very small transactions, which the e-commerce operator may be doing with customers in India. But again, to my mind, given the consumer base in India, to 2 crore threshold, to my mind, is nothing. Again, like we have seen in digital advertisement, if the non-resident e-commerce operator has got a permanent establishment in India, through which the e-commerce supply of services are effectively connected with, then obviously the equalization levy doesn't apply, because that transaction would anyways be taxable in India. So this is the broad construct of this levy. And if we look at the next slide and delve a little bit more into how these terms are defined. So the e-commerce operator, who is the person who has the primary responsibility to deposit or pay the equalization levy in India, is defined to mean a non-resident who owns, operates, or manages digital or electronic facility or platform for online sale of goods or provision of services, or both. So if you have to sort of deconstruct this definition, e-commerce operator necessarily has to be a non-resident, first of all. So resident e-commerce operators are not covered within this levy, obviously for obvious reasons, that they are anyways paying taxes in India being residents. So a non-resident, and the non-resident who owns, operates, or manages a digital or electronic facility or platform. So again, this is important, either owning, if not owning, then operating or managing. Digital or electronic facility or platform. And these terms, digital or electronic facility or platform, unfortunately, is not defined in this chapter. So one has to go by the general definition unless any clarification comes up. And further to this, it says that this digital electronic facility or platform is for online sale of goods or provision of services, or both. So what you are doing through this digital platform is essentially either selling goods or services online, or both. Now, if you look at the definition of e-commerce supply or services, because this is coming out of the main provisions of the levy, because this levy is on e-commerce operator from e-commerce supply or services. So we looked at the definition of e-commerce operator. Let us look at what is the meaning of e-commerce supply or services. E-commerce supply or services means any online sale of goods owned by e-commerce operator, online provision of services provided by e-commerce operator, or online sale of goods or provision of services, or both, which is facilitated by e-commerce operator. Then again, this is important. So the e-commerce operator may sell goods or services on his own account, or he may merely be a facilitator for sale of goods or services, or any combination of the above. So again, this is a very important definition because unless the transaction qualifies as e-commerce supply or services, meaning there is an online sale of goods or services by the e-commerce operator, or online sale of goods or services which is facilitated by the e-commerce operator, then this levy will not apply. So again, this is very important, and fortunately they have defined what is the meaning of online sale of goods, which we will see in subsequent slides. And then if we look at the construct of this whole levy, yeah, Manish, you can move on to the next slide. Maybe this gives a proper idea of how it works. So there is a non-resident e-commerce operator who is obviously outside India. He does not have a permanent establishment in India through which these transactions are connected, or these transactions are not linked to the permanent establishment in India. And then there is a buyer or a service recipient in India. That person is a resident in India. In certain situations, there is a payment which another non-resident may make to the non-resident e-commerce operator. There are certain specified circumstances which are mentioned, which I don't want to complicate for this session, but in certain situations, transactions between two non-residents may also be liable to equalization levy in India. And essentially, the liability to pay to the government is of the non-resident e-commerce operator. So again, we will look at in our next section in the presentation today, what are the compliance requirement for the non-resident e-commerce operator. The 2% levy is on the consideration which is received or receivable by the e-commerce operator. So this is the framework of this levy on e-commerce supply and services. And as I mentioned, there is a marked difference in the manner in which the levy for digital advertisement happens, because that is the liability of the service recipient in India, and which is payable at 6%. So having said that, I mean, I would straight away jump into what are the open issues. But before that, let me just re-emphasize that this whole concept of taxation of digital economy, as countries have sort of realized that it is not something which has one answer, right? So there are a lot of interpretation issues in terms of how these terms have to be interpreted. But what one does, if one looks at the what is being sought to be achieved, is that there is a non-resident supplier of goods or services, and there is a big consumer base. For example, in a country like India, the non-resident supplier of goods or services is deriving revenues in India, and this is being done without having a permanent establishment in India, and therefore our current laws are not adequate to bring these payments to taxation in India. And therefore this is the broad objective which is sought to be achieved as to how I get my share of pie of taxation in India. Having said that, the manner in which this law as is currently drafted leaves a lot of gray areas in terms of how this levy will actually be collected, what is the consideration on which it should be applied, and there are various practical issues on which one would have hoped that there was some clarifications which could have been issued either in the form of FAQs or some circulars. Having said that, let us just look at what could be the more reasonable interpretation, and which are the areas where there may still be some practical challenges. So again the question comes, we talked about foreign tax credit. I did mention that this is not an income tax, and you can get a foreign tax credit under the relevant double tax avoidance agreement if it is an income tax. So this is not an income tax. The question also keeps coming, and again, I'm not an expert on GST, but my understanding is that it is not that once you pay equalization levy, you may still need to pay GST. So GST is an independent law in itself. So to the extent GST is applicable on any of the services, either under reverse charge or under any other mechanism, one may still need to look at it separately. So these are independent regulations. The second question, which was widely debated, was that what happens to several intra-group payments, and many of the multinational companies may have a headquarter company or a entity which is sort of pooling procurement of goods or services and then redistributing it to various entities amongst the group. What happens to that? Now, fundamentally, if you look at the construct of this levy, there is no exclusion which is provided on any intra-group payments or payment between group entities. That is point number one. Point number two, therefore, is that if there is any transaction which could qualify as e-commerce supply or service, one has to look at whether the non-resident entity or the non-resident group entity therefore uh, could qualify as an e-commerce operator. Like we saw the definition, an e-commerce operator is an entity which owns, manages, or operates an e-commerce facility or a platform. So again, one will have to apply this definition to see whether two things. One, whether the transaction between the group companies qualify as e-commerce supply or services. Second being whether the non-resident group company qualifies as an e-commerce operator. So these tests would still need to be applied even for intra-group payments, because there is no specific exemption to such payments which is carved out as of now. Thirdly, there may be several businesses which uses a lot of technology, for delivery of services, and they may be, regulated businesses, either under a different regulators, be it, uh, maybe, relating to payment gateways and other regulated financial services, or, certain aspects of telecom services, and so on and so forth. Again, the law, the way it is, there is nothing which is specified that if the non-resident is regulated and by any other regulator, there will be any exemption. So to my mind, be it intra-group payments or any other services which are regulated under any other law, you still have to apply this basic sort of definitions to see, first of all, whether there is an e-commerce supply or service. Second, whether this e-commerce supply or services is by the e-commerce operator. And if it is so, then there could be a equalization levy on that e-commerce operator. So this is, on the scope. Now, let us look a little bit more, on the definition of the e-commerce operator itself. Now, if we see, as I mentioned, there are certain aspects within the definition of e-commerce operator, which has been sort of defined within the law itself. But for example, the term digital or electronic facility, is something which is still not defined. So the question is, what interpretation should be given to a digital or electronic facility? Now, to my mind, a digital or electronic facility could mean a web portal or a mobile application or an internet facility. These are commonly used terms, right? So, obviously one has to give a natural meaning to it. The question, however, gets a little complicated because, electronic facility may or may not be digital facility. So, it may be an independent facility which is sort of, complementing the digital facility. So these are some of the things which are not defined. A very simple sort of an example which, or, question which comes to everybody's mind is, when I sort of communicate, through emails, whether that should be considered as a digital or electronic facility. Now, again, there is no clarity under the Act, but my personal view would be that, emails as such should not be considered as a digital or electronic facility. It is a digital way of communication, certainly, but you cannot, call it as a digital or electronic facility in the context in which it is used, for the purpose of e-commerce operator. So emails, telephone lines, internet lines, hopefully, these are the common form of means. So, this is something which which should be, sort of kept out. If we apply this kind of interpretation, then as a corollary to this, any facility which is a digital or an electronic facility which is available, to the mass or to the public, wherein anybody can sort of access it and perhaps buy any goods or services. Those are the kind of facilities should be sort of should get covered over here, and anything which is a digital communication, which is essentially between two parties, which is not a facility which is available as an access to all, should not be covered. Again, this is a matter of interpretation. Again, the question, if you look at very technically, it says that, this is a levy on a non-resident who is an e-commerce operator. So the question is that, if a non-resident, let's say, is selling his goods or services through a operator or an e-commerce operator, which is an Indian operator or a resident in India, then technically, the non-resident is not owning, the e-commerce, is not owning nor operating nor managing a e-commerce facility or platform. Then technically, does it mean that, on such transactions, there should be no equalization levy, because the e-commerce facility or platform is owned by the Indian resident. And again, there could be a converse situation. What happens where an Indian resident is selling his goods or services on a platform which is owned or operated by a non-resident operator. At least on this part, to my mind, there is a fair, interpretation that, this could get covered within the definition of e-commerce supply or services, because if you look at the definition closely, even transactions which are facilitated by the e-commerce operator gets covered. So it is not necessary that the goods or services has to be owned or provided by the non-resident operator himself. And at least this leg of the definition makes it clear that even if the non-resident operator is not selling his own goods or providing his own services, but he is merely facilitating it because he owns the platform or he has got rights to the platform, then this may get covered, or it should get covered. Yeah. So again, the question also comes, if you move on to the next slide, on, how do you interpret the e-commerce supply or services? Now, as I mentioned, e-commerce supply of services has been defined as online sale of goods owned by the e-commerce operator, or online provision of services, which is provided by the e-commerce operator, or online sale or services which is facilitated by the e-commerce operator. Now, the term online again has been defined to mean a facility or service or right or benefit or access that is obtained through the internet or any other form of digital or telecommunication network. So again, one would, one is not surprised that, it covers, any communication of the services or the sale of goods which happens through the internet or through digital means or through telecommunication network. Now the question still remains because, as I mentioned, to my mind, for something like an email, which is obviously through the internet, but whether emails could qualify as a e-commerce facility or a platform, that is where, to my mind, emails should be out. But any e-commerce facility or a platform would definitely work, if there is a, communication through the internet or digital means. Now, the question, again, and this is to my mind a very, very important question, while there are several issues in terms of, how this levy is to be administered. But the fundamental question, if I may, say, is how do you sort of interpret this word online sale of goods or online provision of services? And let me just give an illustration. So online sale of goods, like we normally do, if I have to break it into two parts, one is, the online contracting, which happens. So you purchase the goods online. But as we know that, the delivery or the supply of goods obviously has to happen offline, right? When we talk about tangible goods. So the term online sale of goods, if we have to then give its natural meaning, would only mean that sale of goods where contracting for sale of goods is happening online, even though the supply of the goods may happen offline. So that is one. Now let us come to the definition of online provision of services. Similarly, if we have to interpret online provision of services in the same manner as online sale of goods, then the contracting for provision of services has to happen online. The provision of services may or may not happen online. So the question is that, is it necessary that online provision of services, where both aspects, the contracting for the provision of services is happening online, as well as the supply of services is happening online? That is a question. So this is something which, to my mind, should be clarified or should have been clarified, because as I mentioned, the intention is clear. And when we look at and contrast it with online sale of goods, one would sort of agree that, contracting for sale of goods, so long as it happens online, the supply of goods may or may not happen online. So that is one. And one example which I can sort of, take for supply of goods online is purchase of software, right? If we say that, software is a goods or a copyrighted article, as as many of us would have taken a view in the context of royalty, then software is something where you can make an agreement for online purchase of the software, and the software can either be supplied to you or couriered to you on a disk, or it can also be supplied to you online. So you can have an online supply of goods. But there could be numerous other goods which are tangible goods, which cannot be supplied online and which necessarily be delivered offline. But the contract for sale of goods, so long as it is happening online, to my mind, it will get covered. And if we have to apply a similar analogy to services, to my mind, if the services or the contract for provision of services is happening online, the services may or may not be delivered online, it will get covered. So again, this is a very important aspect, and the industry was hoping that there should have been some FAQs or clarifications on different scenarios, so that there is no ambiguity on what is covered and what is not covered. Moving on, another question is on what is the consideration on which the equalization levy applies. And again, if I have to take a couple of illustrations, One scenario could be that the online supply of services is being done by the e-commerce operator who owns or operates the e-commerce facility or the platform. And at the same time, he is supplying or selling his own goods or services through the e-commerce platform. Now, this is a scenario where, to my mind, there shouldn't be too much of a doubt because the consideration or the gross consideration which is received by the e-commerce operator should be amenable to equalization levy. Now, let us consider a different scenario where the e-commerce operator is facilitating the online supply of services. So he is a marketplace operator, and the merchants are actually using the marketplace to sell their goods or services. Now the question is that whether you would apply equalization levy on the gross amount of consideration which is paid by the resident in India, because that will actually include the sale price or consideration of the for the entire goods or services. However, the e-commerce operator may in turn be only earning in respect of the e-commerce platform or facility which is being provided to the resident or to the merchant who is supplying goods or services. So this is again not very clear. On a literal reading of the way the law is today, it would appear that even in a case where the e-commerce operator is only facilitating the supply of goods or services, the equalization levy could apply on the entire consideration. Right. Similarly, one would, there could be other practical situations where, how do you apply the de minimis threshold of 2 crores? If the payment, I don't think that is happening today, but let's say that, if the payment for goods is directly going to the merchant and not going to the account of the e-commerce operator, would it change anything? These are some of the practical aspects. But to my mind, the way the law is today, the entire consideration, even if the non-resident is merely facilitating, the sale or supply, the entire consideration will be subject to e-commerce levy of 2%. Let us move on to the next slide. Yeah, and this is again very interesting aspect of how the e-commerce supplier services has been brought to tax, because if we just take a step back, and this is more to my mind sort of exaggerated in a country like India. This issue which I'm just going to elaborate on is that today we already have under our Income Tax Act, under the source rule, taxation of fees for technical services or taxation of royalty, where the source rule essentially says that even though the non-resident does not have any business connection or place of business in India, under the India domestic source rules, if the payment is in the nature of FTS or royalty, it becomes taxable in India under section 916 or 917. The only saving grace, under the source rule is that if the services are provided under a treaty country, one may still argue or take a position whether the payment is eventually taxable under the tax treaty or not. But the source rule clearly brings to tax certain payments where the services may be provided from outside India, or some licenses are provided from outside India, and FTS or royalty otherwise is not sourced in India, but because the resident is a payer in India, it is deemed to be sourced in India. Now a question arises that even equalization levy applies to supply or supply of goods or services, or e-commerce supply of services from outside India. So can there be a situation where a particular transaction is taxable under the provisions of the Income Tax Act under 916, 917 under the source rules, as well as under the equalization levy, because it is e-commerce supply or services? To my mind, yes, there is an overlap to an extent. So just to illustrate, for example, there could be certain services or fees for technical services, which you may certainly, go on a website and avail the services online. It could be any consultancy services which is provided online, and it is covered under, for example, 917. And because it is provided by an e-commerce operator, it is e-commerce supply or service, it will also be covered under the equalization levy. Now the question which one grapples with is that could the intention of the legislature be to sort of shift the taxation of this income, which was anyways taxable under 917, from Income Tax Act to the equalization levy? Would that be the intention? Because if you see, there is a provision under section 5050 of the Income Tax Act, which sort of gives an exemption to the non-resident service provider, where equalization levy is applied on these specified services. So if a service is taxable, let's say it is a digital advertisement which is taxable, or let's say it is e-commerce supply services which is taxable under equalization levy, then under Income Tax Act, and because of section 1050, the same services cannot be taxable. There is an exemption which is provided. Now, because of the operation of this exemption, what could happen is that the service which was otherwise taxable under 917 no longer gets taxed under the Income Tax Act, because you have already paid equalization levy at the rate of 2%, or the non-resident has paid the equalization levy at the rate of 2%. So this again, to my mind, is an, I don't know whether, this is intended consequence, or, the draftsman has missed something, because very simply, if you think about it, a payment which was otherwise taxable at 10% will now be taxable at 2%. And I don't know whether that is something which was intended by the draftsman. So that is one. Having said that, unfortunately, the way the exemption has been worded, in particular for e-commerce supply or services, the exemption actually does not apply to the current financial year 2021. The exemption actually kicks in from financial year beginning 1st April 21. So in the current financial year, as we noted, equalization levy is applicable from 1 April 2020. So in the financial year 2021, you will have a situation where a certain payment is liable to equalization levy, and it is also subjected to income tax. And again, this is a dual taxation by India. We talked about the economic double taxation, where the non-resident is not able to claim credit, but this is a jurisdictional double taxation where India is levying tax on the same income twice. Again, seems to be unintended, and it was hoped that this would have been clarified, or should have been clarified, to say that if equalization levy is applicable on a particular transaction from FY20 onwards, the exemption should also kick in from FY2021 and not be deferred by 1 year. So these are again some very, very important issues on which one would need some clarity. But on a literal reading, as I mentioned, that there will be a situation or transactions in FY 2021 where the tax is applicable, income tax is applicable, as well as equalization levy is applicable. So, we talked about the sequence of taxation or the overlap. What happens in the subsequent financial year? Let us say that, we are in financial year 21-22, where section 1050 will sort of kick in the way the law is currently. So you will have a situation where you will obviously, ordinarily evaluate whether a particular payment is taxable and as FTS or royalty under the Act. You will look at, the tax treaty, and ordinarily you would sort of, conclude whether withholding tax needs to be applied on FTS or royalty. Now from FY 2021, you would also need to sort of evaluate at the same time whether this payment is subject to equalization levy, whether the non-resident qualifies as an e-commerce operator, whether the payment is a consideration for e-commerce supply or services, whether the non-resident is going to pay 2% equalization levy on that. Because if the answer to all this is yes, then by virtue of provisions of section 1050, this payment will be exempt from income tax. And if the payment is exempt from income tax under 195, withholding tax applies only on payments which are chargeable to income tax. And if the payment is not chargeable to income tax, then there should be no withholding tax. So this is the sequence of evaluation one will need to do. As I said, there may be some unintended benefit which may be available to the taxpayers, because the payment which was hitherto taxable at 10%, whether because of equalization levy, it becomes taxable at 2%, is something which, we'll have to wait and watch. Okay. In terms of, the construct of the equalization levy and, the structure chart which we saw, the liability or the primary liability to pay is on the non-resident e-commerce operator. The question, is that, as a payer, what is the responsibility, of the Indian payer? Because unlike in income tax, where, even if the income is chargeable in the hands of the non-resident, the obligation to do withholding tax is on the payer. So to that extent, the payer has to comply, has to evaluate, assess. But a question arises as to, as a payer, if a particular payment is chargeable to equalization levy or not. What position, the non-resident wants to take is beyond the control of the payer. As we just looked at, there are several things which one could say, are open issues, be it intercompany payments, be it, something which is done over the email, internet, be it, on gross versus net, where e-commerce operator is only acting as a facilitator. So there are several things which, which are open to interpretation, and the e-commerce operator may take his own position. Many times, the Indian payer may also not be aware whether the what position the e-commerce operator has taken. Having said that, there is a provision under this chapter which sort of casts an obligation of a representative assessee, to the payer. And to my mind, this is again a bit harsh, because as a payer, there are several positions which are beyond the control of the payer. And if the Indian payer is held as a representative assessee for positions which are taken by the non-resident, it is something which is completely beyond. As I contrasted it with the positions taken for withholding tax, as a payer, if two views are possible, a payer would generally take a conservative view, because the obligation is cast on the payer to comply with the withholding tax. But in this case, that is not the case. I don't need to withhold 2% and pay. The obligation to pay is on the non-resident. So this representative assessee is something which, to my mind, is a bit harsh. It is practically not feasible for the payer, or the payer does not have any influence on the e-commerce operator. At best, the payer may just try and get a confirmation whether this payment he is paying equalization levy or not, and depending on that, one can take a position for withholding tax. But other than that, let's say the non-resident operator, knowing fully well that the payment is subject to equalization levy, still does not comply. It will be very harsh if the tax authorities go after the resident entities as a representative assessee to collect the tax, because, as I said, a resident will have no control over this. So again, this is one issue which, to my mind, really needs to be addressed. One needs to look at the practical aspects of it, we talked about all the technical aspects, but let us also look at when these payments are actually payable by the non-resident, what kind of compliances the non-resident has to undergo. Does he require a PAN, not require a PAN? Does he require a bank account in India, not require a bank account in India? What are the other open issues and practical aspects of it? So for that, let me invite my colleague Manish Shah to talk about some of these issues. Over to you, Manish.
Thank you, Jatin. Is my audio, am I audible? Okay. Good afternoon to all the members. I hope everybody is keeping safe health and doing well in this COVID times. As discussed by Jatin in detail, there are two aspects that we are dealing with currently as far as equalization levy is concerned. One is something which was brought in by Finance Act 2016. The other is equalization levy, which has come in by recent amendment through Finance Act 2020. So for both these equalization levy, one on online advertisement and the other on e-commerce related provision of services and supply of goods, etc. The practical nuances would be little different, and that is primarily flowing from the fact that equalization levy on online advertisement is something which is the responsibility of the resident payer or the deductor, whereas equalization levy in respect of e-commerce supplier services is the responsibility of the non-resident e-commerce operator. So as regards this equalization levy on e-commerce supply and services, apart from the technical issues discussed by Jatin, there are also certain other practical aspects in terms of what all is the requirement to be complied with if, let's say, a non-resident e-commerce operator has to start depositing equalization levy in India. So first, the question arises whether the non-resident e-commerce operator is required to obtain a PAN. While equalization levy is not something which is a levy under the Income Tax Act. However, if you look into the payment challan, which is ITNS 285, which one will have to fill in to make the payment of equalization levy to Indian government, there the PAN is something which is mandatorily required to be mentioned. So the short answer to that is non-resident will be required to obtain a PAN in India if it has to do a compliance with payment of equalization levy in India. So that is a prerequisite to begin with. Other question that comes to some mind is that can a non-resident appoint an agent on its behalf to undertake these compliances in India? Because obviously non-residents are not having any setup in India, and just in order to undertake the compliances in India, it may have to go through several hassles. So there, whether it can appoint an agent, currently the way law stands, there is nothing which is provided in terms of appointment of an agent wherein non-resident can say that this is an agent in India who will do the compliance on my behalf. There is nothing which is coming out in the law itself. And essentially, if the non-resident has to apply for its own PAN in order to make the payment of equalization levy in India, there is really very little which can be done about it. As it is, so once non-resident obtains a PAN number in India and has a proper channel being set up for making payment of equalization levy to Indian government, it can obviously take help from any of the service providers or chartered accountants and get the things done. So as far as appointment of agent is concerned, to my mind, currently there is no functionality for doing that. The other important question that comes in is whether the levy would apply in respect of consideration for e-commerce supplier sale, wherein the supplier sale had happened prior to April 1, 2020. However, the consideration is received on or after 1st April 2020. So, and I will club this with the fourth point about the timing of levy. So the question which comes in is, the way law is currently worded, it says that equalization levy has to be paid at the rate of 2% on the consideration received or receivable by non-resident e-commerce operator towards e-commerce supplier services. So, while somebody may read this very narrowly, that consideration received or receivable, since the consideration received is after 1st April 2020, equalization levy should also apply in respect of transactions which have happened prior to that date. But that will be sort of too harsh or unreasonable. It will lead to a lot of unintended consequences. To my mind, or a more rational or a harmonious way of reading it is, we have to read this entire definition of e-commerce supplier services together. So whenever there is an e-commerce supplier services for which the consideration is received or receivable on or after 1st April 2020. So not only the consideration is received on or after 1st April 2020, even the supplier e-commerce supplier services should also have happened after that date. Then in that case, the provision should kick in. Otherwise, as I mentioned it, there could be a lot of unintended consequences. As regards timing of levy, so why this question is relevant is because of the word received or receivable. So what could happen is that, let's say the timing of raising an invoice, provision of services, receipt of consideration, and recognition of revenue in my books of account could be different. So what should be the time where, what should be the point in time where when the non-resident should account for this equalization levy and make the payment to the government? So, again, this requires a clarification to a certain extent, because these are certain issues which are not really coming out very clearly from the law. Last thing on self-certification versus audit. So what we mean over here is, currently, as far as equalization levy on online advertisement is concerned, there is a sufficient disclosure. There is an entry in the tax audit report as well, wherein the tax auditor will do a certification in terms of compliance of equalization levy in respect of payment made by resident to online towards online advertisements, etc. However, in case of a non-resident, assuming that non-resident is liable to equalization levy in respect of these e-commerce transactions, and it makes the payment of equalization levy, the question is, currently there is no mechanism prescribed under the law or rules wherein the non-resident will be liable to, let's say, submit a particular certificate from a chartered accountant or any kind of a self-certification or any forms online to say that it has complied with the applicable provisions of equalization levy. Neither there is obviously any reporting in terms of such compliances undertaken by non-resident, because it is non-residents would not be subjected to the general compliance requirement under the Income Tax Act in India. So that is something which is again currently an open issue. So essentially these are some of the other issues which are arising more from the perspective of practical application of this levy. In the next section what we have done is, okay, in the next section, what we have done is we have laid down the procedural aspects, and we have given a quick snapshot in terms of procedural requirements for online advertisement vis-a-vis e-commerce, so that there is a contrast that everybody can understand and appreciate. So this is a summary table. So as discussed in earlier parts of the presentation, who has to pay online advertisement? The liability is on the resident who is availing the services from a non-resident. So resident has to pay. It works similar to something like withholding tax, wherein the resident would have to pay that equalization levy to the government on in respect of the services availed towards online advertisement from the non-resident. In contrast to that, in respect of e-commerce, the liability to make the payment is on the non-resident e-commerce operator. A due date for payment, online advertisement, the payments are required to be done like TDS, 7th day after the expiry of each month, in respect of 6% equalization levy. Whereas in case of e-commerce, where the responsibility lies with the non-resident e-commerce operator, the payment is required to be made on a quarterly basis. 7th of the next month, 7th of the month following the end of the quarter is the due date for making the payment. The rate of levy again is different, 6%, 2%. Threshold, minimum threshold which is provided is also different. In online advertisement, it is 1 lakh, whereas in case of e-commerce, it is 2 crore. Application, date of application, as we discussed, online advertisement has been there from June 1, 2016, whereas e-commerce will be April 1, 2020. Exemption under Section 10, as discussed in earlier section by Jatin. Section 10 exemption in respect of online advertisement was available from the date on which it was introduced. Whereas in respect of e-commerce, interestingly, while e-commerce equalization levy is introduced from 1 April 2020, the exemption applies from 1st April 2021. So for this first year of intervening period, in provisions of the Income Tax Act as well as equalization levy, both need to be evaluated in respect of payments being made. Requirement of annual return filing applicable to both. The form of return filing for online advertisement, we've been filing returns in Form 1. Whereas in respect of e-commerce, obviously the requirement to file annual return will come for the first time in June 2021. So forms are not yet notified as on date. In terms of timeline for filing this annual return, again it is 30th June following the end of the financial year, for which the equalization levy return has to be filed. So for year 2021, the due date will be June 2021. 30th June 2021 last. Issues in payment of equalization levy, again in respect of online advertisement, it works normally. Like we deposit TDS, we deposit on equalization levy for online advertisement at the rate of 6%. And there's this Challan 285 under which you need to make the payment. In respect of e-commerce operators, this Challan number 285 was not enabled till very recently for to provide a utility for making payment by non-resident e-commerce operator via that Challan. However, it has been updated, and now Challan number 285 also provides an entry under which non-resident e-commerce operator can make the payment of equalization levy in India. So one important question is obviously that we've dealt with, whether they need to apply for PAN. Yes, they need to apply for PAN as per the Challan also. Secondly, whether they need to have a bank account in India in order to make this payment of equalization levy. So in ideal scenario, the answer is yes. They need to have a bank account in India, but from a practical perspective, we also understand there are certain Indian banks which are providing the services of making the payment of equalization levy to the government authorities by non-resident without having to open a bank account in India. So they do provide such kind of facility as we understand. In terms of other aspects, what happens if there is a failure to deduct and deposit this equalization levy? So again, like in case of TDS, if there is a failure to deposit equalization levy, the corresponding expenditure will be disallowed for the purpose of deduction under the Income Tax Act. And in the year in which you take the compliance, you do the compliance in respect of this payment of equalization levy, that in that subsequent year, you can claim a deduction of the expenditure exactly like how TDS works. Consequences of delay in payment of equalization levy: interest at the rate of 1% for every month or part thereof applies. Timelines we already discussed in terms of payment, in terms of annual return filing requirements. Belated or revised statement can be filed within a period of 2 years from the end of the financial year in which the specified services are provided. For processing of return, a timeline of 1 year has been given, 1 year from the end of the financial year in which the statement was filed. And upon intimation, mistakes apparent from record can also be rectified within a period of 1 year. In terms of penal and prosecution consequences, failure to deduct equalization levy, penalty could be equivalent to the amount of equalization levy. Failure to make the payment after having deducted the equalization levy, the penalty is 1,000 rupee per day or the amount of equalization levy maximum. Payment of 100 rupee per day applies in case of failure to file equalization levy statement. And there are certain prosecution and provisions as well in this relation. So this is more or less something, if I have to draw some parallel, it works equally to how TDS provisions function. The only qualitative differences between the kind of levy, online advertisement and e-commerce operator, and who is required to make the payment. Again, appeal mechanism has been provided, under this equalization levy law as well, wherein against the order passed by the assessing authorities, assessing or taxpayer could file an appeal to CITA. The appeal can also lie to the tribunal post order of CITA if the taxpayer wants to contest any further. Appeal can also be filed against the penalty order. However, rectification or intimation, currently there is no provision through which appeal can be filed. So probably, writ can be explored if facts of the case merit it. Powers under 264 or 263 are something which is obviously under the Income Tax Act in respect of assessment, which are happening under the Act, so not applicable here. And any prosecution proceedings cannot be initiated without prior approval of Chief Commissioner of Income Tax. So while currently, the way this entire procedure functions, while they are not saying that this is something which is falling within the provisions of Income Tax Act, or whether it is a direct tax or indirect tax, but the way the procedure functions, it is quite similar to way things happen under normal assessment proceedings. These are some of the relevant rules. This is just for information. It is not much that we need to delve into. So, with this, we come to the end of our presentation. We'll be happy to take some questions. I think we have done it in time. Over to Seemaji.
Yes. We will take the question and answers. Chintan, have you listed the questions?
I'm ready.
Yeah. Please share your screen so that...
Just a minute. Some last question is there. I'll just add that and then...
Okay, sure.
Okay, so the first question is, equalization levy is applicable to which assessee, and any turnover limit for applicability and exemption for transaction from levy of equalization levy. Okay, so like we discussed, equalization levy is applicable to any non-resident who could be called as an e-commerce operator. There is a definition of e-commerce operator which is given in the law, and there is a minimum threshold limit of 2 crores or INR 20 million if the consideration is in excess of INR 2 crore or 20 million. then there is this new levy of 2%, which is applicable, which is payable by the non-resident e-commerce operator. Indian company using parent company cloud and provide services, whether equalization levy applies. So yeah, so this is a good question. So we talked about the intercompany or intra-group payments. Now there are two legs to this, if I understood this question correctly. One leg of this transaction is where there is an agreement between the non-resident group company, which is sort of permitting the Indian company or providing cloud services to the Indian company. So that is the one leg. The second leg is the Indian company in turn is providing services to its customers. The second leg, equalization levy should not apply because that is a service provided by the Indian resident entity. But on the first leg, equalization levy could apply if the non-resident entity which is providing this cloud services qualifies as an e-commerce operator.
Yeah, I was adding new questions also, so sorry for this. Yeah, carry on, sir.
Yeah, no problem.
Should I read it out?
No, not a problem. I think it is visible, so don't worry. So whether turnover limit of 2 crore is aggregate in a financial year comprising transactions made with all buyers, or limit is with respect to each buyer. Manish, you want to take this question?
Yeah, Jatin. So this 2 crore aggregate minimum threshold which is there, it is applicable in respect of sale of goods or provision of services vis-a-vis e-commerce operator. It is not for the, it cannot be read for each buyer. So the answer to this should be, it is vis-a-vis e-commerce operator. So let's say e-commerce operator has got 10 different buyers and transactions per buyer is less than 2 crore, but putting all together it exceeds 2 crore, then equalization levy is applicable.
Right. The next question is, Indian subsidiary provides services using Indian IP address to its parent company in UK. Will parent company be liable for equalization levy? So in this case, the parent company should not be liable to equalization levy. Again, I'm just going to the basic fundamentals of when this levy is applicable. This levy is applicable to a non-resident who either supplies goods or provides services online, e-commerce supply of goods or services. In this case, the supplier of services or the provider of services is a resident entity. So it is a reverse situation. And in any case, the Indian subsidiary will be paying taxes in India. So there is no point in levying equalization levy. The next question is with respect to definition of e-commerce operator. Is Amazon also an e-commerce operator, or only the seller who uses this platform? Be it Amazon or any other entity, e-commerce operator is a non-resident which owns, manages or operates or manages a e-commerce facility or a platform. So, the seller ordinarily is a merchant, who is just using the marketplace, digital marketplace for selling his goods. He may not be an operator or a manager or owner of the platform. So, it will always be an entity which either owns, operates, or manages the e-commerce platform. Next question, Facebook, Google will be covered under e-commerce operator. So I can't comment on the specific fact pattern of Facebook or Google, but I would say that any non-resident entity which is providing services, and that non-resident entity, if it owns, operates, or manages any e-commerce facility or platform, could qualify obviously one needs to look at the whole gamut of the transaction from end to end to comment whether a particular entity is covered or not. Is post made by individuals on Facebook and payment made to Facebook will be liable to EL? I don't know what is meant by this question, post made by individuals, but any payment by the resident. So see again, this is a good question. The second part of it, if I understood it, is that whether this levy is applicable only on B2B transactions, or it can apply to even B2C transactions. And again, this is one factor which they would have considered, because see, they have not the liability to pay this equalization levy, unlike in the case of online or digital advertisement, is not on the payer. The liability is cast on the payee or the receiver. And one important factor could be that for e-commerce supply or services, even an individual could be the payer. So they did not want to burden individuals with any compliance requirements, and therefore even if the e-commerce operator receives any consideration even from individuals or retail customers, the equalization levy will apply to the non-resident e-commerce operator. The next question is, if non-resident gives online consultancy services on one-to-one basis and on services imported by Indian service recipient, is he paying IGST? How will such transaction be looked under EL law? So again, this takes us to the question of what is the meaning of electronic facility, or what is the meaning of electronic platform or a digital platform. So if there is a private contract between a non-resident and a resident, and the contract, let's say, is concluded on the email, and let's say the service or the advice is received on the email, a question arises whether such payment should be liable to equalization levy. To my mind, my view would be that such payments are not intended, because you can't say that the non-resident service provider is owning or operating or managing any electronic facility or a digital platform. However, if let's say the non-resident service provider is doing it through his own digital platform or through his own cloud services platform, one will have to look at the facts. But in a very simplistic situation where you contract over the email, the services are received over the email, that is one spectrum. The other end of the spectrum could be that the non-resident as a digital platform, anybody can access that platform, order services online, the services are delivered online. That is the other end of the spectrum, which will be liable to equalization levy. The next question is, and sorry, just to complete that last part, whether GST is paid on it or not should not be determinative factor of payment of equalization levy. The next question is, Manish.
Yeah. So annual return filing is online and by DSE. So currently, as I mentioned, we are still awaiting the form for e-commerce. As far as online advertisement is concerned, annual return is online by DSE under Form 1.
Right. The next question also, like we discussed, if a particular service, including the advertisement services, is rendered through the permanent establishment of the non-resident in India, in that case, equalization levy will not apply. The non-resident will have to pay income tax on the profits which are attributable to the permanent establishment. disallowance of expense, how will one identify this e-commerce transaction, as most of the times done through credit card of individual through expense booked by the company? I don't think there is any disallowance of expense.
So in only in the, yes, so in the context of e-commerce, as it is non-resident is not filing any returns or paying any other taxes in India, so there this question doesn't come up. In the context of online advertisement, when the liability to make the payment is on the resident deductor, there the disallowance of expense is something which is provided under 40A IB of Income Tax Act. The disallowance in respect of non-compliance with TDS is under 40A IA, and thereafter this IB is introduced. So this question is equally valid for even transaction where TDS applies, right? In respect of any, let's say, transactions which are done online, wherein the payment is made through credit card of the employees or the directors of the company, then also, it is the responsibility of the tax auditor to do that audit and identify and report. So here also it will work in the similar fashion.
Yeah. And just to sort of supplement what Manish mentioned, see, to my mind, when we talk about the digital advertisement payment, unlike, e-commerce supply or services, it is unlikely that the payments would be through individuals' credit cards, because advertisement payments are generally on corporate account or business account, and more often than not, it will be through other banking channels. But like Manish mentioned, that to the extent the mode of payment is not determinative, to the extent there is an obligation, and if it is not done, at least for digital advertisement, the consequences would apply. Okay, let me look at the next question. A Private Limited has taken subscription of LinkedIn portal for accessing the database or using the same for recruitment of management cadre employees. The company is required to pay X amount to Singapore-based entity. TDS under 195 is applicable, as this is not a advertisement cost into the definition of specified service. So is this question on TDS or is this question on equalization levy? I'm not very clear. But if the question is on equalization levy, prima facie, if the Singapore-based non-resident service provider qualifies as the e-commerce operator, and the services also appear to be provided online, equalization levy may apply. As regards withholding tax, as we discussed, if equalization levy applies from FY21 onwards, the law as it is currently, the income will be exempt from income tax and there will be no withholding tax under section 195. However, for the current financial year, one will still have to see whether this subscription to this website, whether it qualifies as royalty or FTS. And one will have to look at, including the India-Singapore Treaty, and then take a call whether for this financial year, whether withholding tax under 195 also applies.
There are some more questions. Just a minute. It is already covered. So
yeah, this we already covered.
You can start. Yeah, it's 2 crore threshold also, I think you have covered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we can go on to the next question.
I think this is also covered.
This is covered, yeah.
It is required. Liability starts after. So you can just elaborate. This is, if you have not estimated the threshold of 2 crores, what will happen, if it crosses during the year? Can you just elaborate on that?
So I think the wordings of the law are similar as we have in case of TDS provision. So it says that equalization levy does not apply if the turnover is less than 2 crore in a previous year. So in case turnover exceeds 2 crore, equalization levy applies from rupee 1. So there, one will have to obviously have certain sort of estimate to begin with in order to, not have any kind of non-compliances.
Okay. So this one.
Yeah, the next question, again, it's a good question from a practical standpoint. In case equalization levy is paid on advertising while using 15 CB, what are precautions members should take? So again, this is a practical, a point, because, any remittance that company makes to a non-resident, as we are aware, you will have to obtain a 15 CB certificate, which has to be given to your bank or authorized dealer, right? So ordinarily, in a situation where any payment, is made, we would comment on, what is the basis for arriving at the conclusion as to, why TDS is applied, why a particular rate is applied, or if TDS is not applied, what is the exemption? Either it is under the Income Tax Act or under the tax treaty. So to my mind, in a situation where a particular payment is chargeable to equalization levy, for example, if it is an advertisement payment which is chargeable to equalization levy, there are two ways of going about it when we talk about 15 CB. For instance, one way of putting it in 15 CB is to say that, advertisement payment, assuming that, it is digital advertising. Let's say advertisement payment is not taxable under Section 5, read with Section 9. That is one way of going about it. The other way is to simply mention that, this payment is exempt in the hands of the non-resident under Section 1050. And therefore it is not subject to withholding tax. So to my mind, either of the representation, is fine. But mentioning that the payment is exempt under 1015 would be a more simplistic way of putting it, and which does not raise more questions.
And just to add on to what Jatin said, so in terms of issuing 15 CB, one of these two options can be selected, and one can say that it is exempt under 1050 and that is why no income tax. But very technically speaking, unless the bankers are really asking for it, a position can also be taken that there is no 15 CB requirement for this kind of a payment, because essentially it is not liable to Income Tax Act. So, ideally the compliance is only required in terms of doing 15 CA. So when you select 15 CA Part D, there we take a particular category of payment which is not liable to Income Tax Act in India. And there 15 CB is not asked for. So that is also something which one can bear in mind. But however, if it is required for the benefit of the taxpayer, or let's say bankers are insisting, then we can adopt approach as discussed by Jatin.
So the last two now. I think this was left.
Yeah. As regards payment for digital advertisement, I don't think it is limited to corporate assessees. Any resident making payment for digital advertisement is required to comply with equalization levy. How to understand whether the operator is connected to PE in India? Again, this is a good question from a practical standpoint. Again, as most of practicing chartered accountants, we would have, encountered this even for payment of royalty and FTS. And ordinarily, you would take a declaration to say that, whether the non-resident has a PE in India, whether the payment could be said to be in connection with the PE in India. To my mind, some similar declaration will have to be obtained, especially in cases where, there is an overlap. So as to say that, payment is could fall both within equalization levy as well as under the Income Tax Act. Last question, Facebook directly debits account of service receiver for online ad. How service receiver can deduct? See, like we mentioned, it is not the liability of the service receiver to deduct tax. This is a levy which is payable by the non-resident directly to the government. There is no question of service receiver complying with the provision when it comes to e-commerce supply. However, when it comes to digital advertisement, a service receiver has to pay the tax. It is again not a tax deduction. It is a tax liability, so as to say.
I think we can conclude, and Seema madam, you can take it over.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jatin Kanbar and CA Manisha. It is an excellent session and very informative. Your presentation is also very good. I now request our Deputy Convener, CA Krishna Kumar Kedia, to present vote of thanks to both the speakers.
This topic concept of equalization levy under Income Tax Act was very well covered by the learned speaker Jatin Kanwar and Mr. Manish, and it was very well covered. The presentation was very informative, and Mr. Jatin had taken us to the entire world tour by sitting at home only in today's sitting. On behalf of JB Nagar CP Study Circle, I propose a hearty vote of thanks to the speakers, Mr. Jatin and Mr. Manish Shah, for today's very good speech. Thank you on behalf of us. Thanks.
Thank you. Very informative.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. And I hope all the participants found the session useful.
Yes.
Stay safe, everyone, and take care. Thank you for having us.